Attila the Hun was born around 406 CE, likely on the Great Hungarian Plain. The Huns were a nomadic people who had migrated westward from Central Asia into Europe, living by herding, hunting, and war. Attila was born into the ruling family of the Huns. His uncle Rua, and later his brother Bleda, ruled before him. Little is known about his childhood, but he was raised in a culture that valued strength, horsemanship, and discipline from an early age. He learned to ride almost before he could walk, to shoot from horseback, and to survive in the harsh Eurasian steppe. Educated in diplomacy and warfare, he observed Roman customs closely, as the Huns alternately fought and traded with the Eastern Roman Empire. By the time he reached adulthood, Attila was prepared not just to lead a tribe, but to command an empire of warriors. In 434 CE, after the death of their uncle Rua, Attila and his brother Bleda became co-rulers of the Huns. Together, they inherited an empire stretching from the Black Sea to the Rhine River. Almost immediately, they negotiated a treaty with the Eastern Roman Empire at Margus, securing a vast annual tribute of gold. The treaty reflected the power shift in Europe. Rome now paid the Huns to keep peace. Attila proved both intelligent and ruthless. He strengthened the Huns' military organization, formed alliances with Germanic tribes, and demanded ever greater tribute from the Romans. Though Bleda shared power, Attila's authority and ambition overshadowed his brothers. By 445 CE, Bleda was dead, likely killed by Attila, and Attila became sole ruler of the Huns, holding absolute command over one of the most feared armies the world had ever seen. Once in full control, Attila began forging the scattered Hunnic confederation into a true empire. He unified dozens of tribes, Huns, Ostrogoths, Gepids, and others, under his leadership through both diplomacy and intimidation. His capital was established somewhere in the Hungarian Plain, a wooden fortress city that became the center of his rule. Attila's leadership style was disciplined and pragmatic. He demanded loyalty and rewarded success, but tolerated no betrayal. He continued extracting tribute from the Eastern Roman Empire, but when payments fell behind, he invaded the Balkans in 447 CE, devastating cities and forcing Emperor Theodosius II to renew tribute on harsher terms. These victories cemented his reputation as the Scourge of God, a man who could bend the most powerful empire of his time to his will. By the mid-5th century, Attila's name inspired terror throughout Europe. To the Romans, he was a near-mythical figure, a destroyer sent by divine wrath. Yet historical accounts, especially from contemporary chroniclers like Priscus, describe him not as a savage brute, but as calm, calculating, and remarkably self-controlled. He lived simply, refusing luxuries, and valued discipline over indulgence. His warriors, however, were ferocious in battle, skilled archers and horsemen who struck without warning, using speed and mobility to overwhelm traditional armies. The fear of Attila's raids caused whole populations to flee before his arrival. Even the mighty Roman fortresses on the Danube trembled at his approach. In just a few years, Attila had transformed the Huns from a loose confederation of raiders into a geopolitical force capable of shaking both halves of the Roman Empire. In 451 CE, Attila turned his attention west, leading a vast coalition of Huns and allied tribes into Gaul, modern-day France. His stated goal was to place his ally, the Frankish prince, on the throne, but his deeper motive was expansion and plunder. The Western Roman general Flavius Aetius, recognizing the threat, forged an alliance of Romans and Visigoths to resist him. The two forces met at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains near modern-day Chalons. It was one of the largest and bloodiest battles of the late ancient world. Though the outcome was indecisive, Attila suffered heavy losses and was forced to retreat. The battle marked the first major check on his advance, and showed that even the Huns could be resisted when Europe stood united. Undeterred by his setback in Gaul, Attila invaded Italy the following year. His army swept through the northern provinces, destroying cities such as Aquileia, which was leveled so completely it was said no trace remained. Panic spread across the Italian peninsula as refugees fled toward Rome. In a dramatic episode, Pope Leo I met Attila near the river Mincio. The details of their meeting are uncertain, but afterward, Attila withdrew from Italy. Some accounts claim the Pope persuaded him through diplomacy. Others suggest famine, disease, and low supplies forced his retreat. Regardless of the cause, Attila spared Rome, a decision that added to his legend. The man who had burned cities across Europe turned away from the Eternal City, leaving historians to debate his motives ever since. Despite his fearsome reputation, Attila's court was organized and disciplined. Contemporary reports describe his headquarters as a sprawling wooden palace on the plains, where envoys from across Europe came to negotiate. The historian Priscus, who visited the Hunnic court, wrote that Attila dressed plainly, eating simple meals while his guests feasted lavishly. He ruled through personal authority, listening carefully to advisors, and maintaining strict control over his subordinates. His power rested on loyalty and fear rather than bureaucracy. Attila was also a skilled diplomat. He manipulated rival Roman factions, played emperors against each other, and used marriage alliances to strengthen his position. His court reflected a balance of barbarian austerity and imperial ambition, a world where the steppe met the empire, and Attila stood at the center of both. In 453 CE, at the height of his power, Attila unexpectedly died. On the night after his wedding to a young bride named Ildiko, he was found dead, apparently from a burst blood vessel or internal bleeding. Rumors of assassination spread, but no evidence was ever proven. His death stunned his empire, which depended entirely on his leadership. According to legend, his soldiers buried him in secret, placing his body in 3 coffins of gold, silver, and iron, and killing the workers who dug the grave to keep the location hidden. The exact site of his burial remains unknown to this day. With his passing, the unity of the Huns quickly unraveled, and their empire collapsed within a few years. Yet his memory endured as one of history's most formidable conquerors. After Attila's death, his sons Elak, Dengizich, and Ernok inherited the empire, but they lacked their father's authority and skill. Almost immediately, the subject tribes rebelled. In 454 CE, a coalition of Gepids and other Germanic peoples defeated the Huns at the Battle of Nidau, breaking their dominance in Central Europe. The surviving Huns scattered, some returning to the steppes, others absorbed into neighboring peoples. The once unified Hunnic Empire vanished almost overnight. Yet its impact on Europe was immense. The migrations it triggered helped reshape the map of the late Roman world, weakening imperial borders and paving the way for the rise of medieval kingdoms. Though their power was brief, the Huns had altered the balance of Europe forever. Attila's legacy has endured for over 1,500 years. To his enemies, he was the Scourge of God, a destroyer sent to punish Rome's corruption. To his people, he was a unifier and a symbol of strength. His campaigns marked the final phase of the Roman Empire's decline and set in motion the great migrations that defined medieval Europe. Even centuries later, his name evoked fear and fascination across cultures, from Norse sagas to German epics and modern literature. While historians debate whether he sought empire, plunder, or divine vengeance, his influence is undeniable. Attila remains one of history's most powerful reminders of how a single leader, rising from the vast steppes, can shake the foundations of civilizations and leave a legend that endures across ages.